Florida's gubernatorial contest is gaining attention over the issue of race. Democrat Andrew Gillum has been targeted by racist robocalls, which include the sounds of a monkey. A white supremacist group is claiming responsibility. A spokesman for Gillum's Republican opponent, Ron DeSantis, called the robocalls appalling. But DeSantis ran into some trouble himself over a controversial comment. Earlier this week, he suggested Florida voters not, quote, monkey this up by electing Gillum. That led to allegations of racism, a claim DeSantis denies. Andrew Gillum addressed the incidents on CNN.
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to tell you, I do find it deeply regrettable. I mean, on the day right after I secured the Democratic nomination, we had to deal with some of the dog whistles directly from my opponent. And I honestly want to sincerely say this, Dana. We can have a challenge between ideas and around what we think the people of the state of Florida deserve. What I don't want this race to turn into is a race of name calling. I want to make sure that we don't racialize and frankly weaponize race as a part of this process, which is why I've called on my opponent to really work to rise above some of these things. People are taking their cues from him, from his campaign, and from Donald Trump. And we saw in Charlottesville that can lead to real, frankly, dangerous outcomes.
And I also want to make
For more on this, we're joined by Adrianne Shropshire, the executive director of BlackPAC, a committee focused on black voter involvement. Adrianne, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with Andrew Gillum there. You heard the mayor say that he wants this election to be about issues like the economy. But how big of a role do you think race is likely to play in this contest?
Well, I think first that obviously the robocalls were disgusting. I think I agree with the mayor in that outside groups like these are going to absolutely take their cues from Republican leadership and from Republican candidates. It is hard to claim that the original comment that DeSantis made about monkeying things up isn't connected to robocalls that then have monkeys in the background. I think that mostly folks are ready for this sort of divisive politics and divisive rhetoric to be out of campaigns and are looking for folks that both have political courage, like Mayor Gillum, have the political courage to stand up to racism and to divisiveness, but also are willing to campaign on the issues that people actually care about. I mean, he has an incredible personal story that is resonating with the actual lived experience of the voters that he is talking to, and that's what voters are looking for.
So the mayor's spokesperson asked the media not to give these racist robocalls additional attention. And I wonder, how delicate a balance do you think it is for a candidate like an Andrew Gillum? He's obviously very far to the left of his opponent, Ron DeSantis. He's obviously an African-American man. These are very sensitive issues of race. How delicate a balance is it to try to address the racism contained in these robocalls, but at the same time, obviously, he is trying to appeal to a broader electorate here and make this not just about race?
Yeah, and I think that the challenge is that these kinds of tactics are not going to go away. I think that when we look back even to last year's gubernatorial race in Virginia and the sort of the turn that Ed Gillespie's campaign took, where they began to use racist images and use racist language to talk about immigrant communities. I think we saw the rejection of that there. I think we saw the rejection of that kind of language in Alabama a month later. And I think that we'll continue to see a rejection of this sort of tactic. But I think that it's not going away. It is a strategy for sure. And I think that Mayor Gillum is striking the right balance in terms of addressing these issues when they need to be addressed, but keeping the focus of his campaign on the very critical issues that are facing the voters of Florida. All of the things that he's talked about, from economics to education to the economic insecurities that working people are feeling. That's his message, and that's what people want to hear about, quite frankly. That's how he won. That is what propelled him to an allegedly surprising victory. I think if you had talked to the voters who supported him, or folks had been talking to the voters who supported them, perhaps it wouldn't have been so much of a surprise that he won.
Just one more along these same lines, going back to Congressman DeSantis's monkey it up comment. This issue of language is not just one that is sort of focused on the Republican Party. This is something that has popped up on the Democratic side as well. And in fact, back in 2007, then presidential candidate Joe Biden came under fire for calling Barack Obama, quote, clean, bright, and articulate. And I want to play a little bit of that.
I mean, you got the first sort of mainstream African American who was articulate and bright and clean and nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook, man. Yeah.
So when we hear that and we look at it through the lens of today, and then we look back at Congressman DeSantis' comments, could it be argued that perhaps it was truly a poor choice of words that was not intended to have some deeper meaning, or this dog whistle sort of meaning that you and others like Mayor Gillum say that it does have? Monkey it up, that phrase.
Well, I think there's first let's stick with Vice President Biden's comments. I mean, I think that there is this notion about this sort of use of the language of articulate that certainly has been historically used to suggest that it is surprising that African Americans can string together 3 sentences and be intelligent. So I think that there are some biases that exist across our political spectrum, but I don't think that it is, the reality is the notion of comparing African Americans to monkeys has a long-standing racist tradition in this country. And it's just not acceptable for someone who is running for office, who is attempting to represent all Floridians, to suggest that they don't understand that history and can't understand how their language is damaging and hurtful and actually in line with racist language.
You think that Congressman DeSantis should have known better?
Absolutely.
Let's turn to another topic here. In an interview with CNN, Mayor Gillum called for President Trump's impeachment, but impeachment power lies in the U.S. House. It doesn't really have to do with state governors. So I wonder, do you think that the mayor should continue to focus on this question of impeaching President Trump, or should he sort of move on and focus on other things?
Well, I think the mayor is focused on other things. I think he's focused on being the governor of Florida. I think that there is a larger question around the current political environment that we're in. And he, like, all Americans, all citizens, quite frankly, are ready to be done with the kind of politics that we're seeing right now. I think that's the reason why we are seeing the, sort of support, voters coming out and supporting a very diverse array of candidates, an array of candidates with progressive ideas, whether those are House candidates or U.S. Senate candidates or gubernatorial candidates. Voters are saying that they are ready to move on for the kind of racism and bigotry and divisiveness that we're seeing come out of Washington. And so I think it's wholly appropriate for him to address that. But I think he is focused on being the governor of Florida.
All right. So many people watching this contest in Florida. Adrianne Shropshire, thank you so much for stopping by, Adrianne. Really appreciate it.